He said, we forged that manifesto, he said, and the Labour Party had no alternative but to implement that manifesto. And one of them was, tears was coming down his eyes. I said, well, you bloody crying for it if we'd won. Yes, he said, but Ray said, you don't realise, he said, the struggle it's been, he says, to win this fight, he said. He said, your mother died for the want of an hospital bed, he said, but other mums coming along will now have it, he said, because our NI will make bloody sure that we'll have decent hospital services. And so, right through my mining career, so on strikes, even during the war we went on strike with Dad and things like that. And then I was invalided out of the colliery then, after I'd done my 7 years. Called into the army and then I went back to the colliery for short periods at Nangara Colliery, some little bit in Bedwas Colliery, and then like all of us here, we got married and things whilst I'm still doing my trade union work, etc., etc. But always my heart was down with the boys underground. And then in 1972 came the miners' strike. It was led by, he was quite a middle of the road, or even a little bit on the right-wing side, who was the miners' leader at that time. I'm trying to think of his name really, I can't think of his name. Was it? Joe Gormley. Joe Gormley. And my father took me to the various picket lines where it was he was on strike, and we would go all over the place. And then, of course, Ted Heath went to the country and said, and called the election and said, who rules Britain? Is it the miners or is it the people? And of course the people said it's the miners. They kicked out Ted Heath, lock, stock and barrel. But then, in his little group of cabinet members, I think she was only PPS at the time, was a woman called Thatcher. And she had her own agenda, what she wanted. And when Ted Heath lost the election, she got together with a group of them, and she planned over a 2 or 3 year period a strategy, and her strategy was to do away with the social gains we've had over the years, do away and privatise and everything that we had brought under public control. And she had this agenda, and she always said the biggest barrier to doing that is the trade union movement. Get rid of the trade union movement, weaken the trade union movement, then we can have the time of our lives. And when she won power as a result of Jim Callaghan, who I fell out with a couple of times, him and Roy Jenkins wouldn't agree to give the people some decent concessions after year after year after year. They tightened their belt to put the country's economy right. And the result was Thatcher won a massive election. And believe you me, and who did she go for? She went for British Leyland, got rid of bloody Robinson, used him as a tool. And Derek Robinson was a good trade unionist, absolutely. And they got rid of him on strike, and the right-wing leaders at that time, Boyd was one of them, and a few of the others. And one by one, then they went for, so they dealt with British Leyland, which Thatcher knew was a weak organisation because they was in deep trouble financially. Then she went for the steel workers, and the steel workers never been on strike before. And I was in the steel works that time. And when they offered the steel workers a pathetic officer, and the steel workers said, no, we won't have that, we'll go on strike. And Bill Sears, who was extremely right-wing, didn't want to go on strike under any circumstances, but strike he had to do because we wanted it. And we were on strike for 13 weeks, and our leaders sold us down the line a little bit. They settled, and we lost, I think it was about 8,000 in Llanwern. And since that time, as we know, Swansea itself used to be the hub of steel in this part of the world. Steelworks closed everywhere. And then she went for the nurses, and then she went for the rail workers, and then she went for the miners. And because she thought she'd weaken everybody now, and the miners would be frightened to death. But of course they didn't take into account what the miners was really like, and they didn't have a Gormley to deal with. They had Arthur Scargill to deal with, and Arthur Scargill working under the Constitution, left it to each area to make their own decision, and the strike took place. There was nothing in the Constitution that they had to have a union-wide ballot. It was always done under the miners, that each area made their own decisions about what they were going to do. And I became treasurer of the miners' support group in my area. And for me, it was the proudest year of my life. I used to be coming home from the steelworks, straight on the picket line at Nangaro. I would be going, collecting money in Cardiff, collecting money in the streets of Caerphilly and elsewhere. I'd be going on the picket lines all over the country, wherever there was the opportunity to go. I was up at Orgreave, and it never ever stopped. And I helped form a choir called Cocock and Caerdydd. You probably see it in Cardiff, singing away like good uns, all against the Palestinians, supporting the Palestinians, supporting everybody in struggle, supporting the peace movement, etc. And we went on the streets and collected thousands of pounds. And when the sort of end of the strike started to come, it was rumoured that Kinnock, who he was betraying, he didn't come out and support the 1972 strike, even though he was a member of Parliament at that point in time. And he didn't come to anywhere in his constituency where the miners was on strike. Not once would he come. And Ron Davies had been elected as a member of Parliament in 1983, and he didn't come to any of the meetings. And I said, well, why don't I? Oh, he said, I'm up at the northeast, he said, helping the miners there. I said, but it's down here in your constituency, that's where you should be helping. But the rumour was rife that Kinnock would definitely get the leadership one day, that Ron Davies would have a cabinet place, and that Kim Howells would be given a safe Labour seat. And we poo-pooed particularly about Kim Howells because he was a full-time officer of the NUM. And of course, the strike ended. The strike ended, and people, when the strike ended, we didn't think it was going to end. We thought we were bound to win. Things was going so well, but it was. I think the few votes of some of the miners from Executive South Wales voted with somebody from Nottingham and one or two from other parts, and they very narrowly voted to return to work. And people talk to me these days about the miners were defeated. Well, the miners were never defeated. Never ever were they defeated. How can you say there's a defeat when honest, decent working men stand on the picket line for a 12-month and were prepared, the majority of them were still prepared to stick it out to the very, very end until they won justice for the miners, because it was never about money. The strike money was never mentioned. It was always about keeping the pits open, looking after our communities, giving our kids a future, because everybody knew, every miner knew what would happen once they started closing the collieries, what they would do to the area. So it was never about money. And the women's support groups were so absolutely fantastic. Many of the miners' wives came away from the kitchen. They formed their own groups. I was going out with them every night. I had an available, go and collect food and this, that and the other. So the women were a key to the strike. They were backing their husbands. They was backing the strike up to 100%. And people came from all over the world. They just couldn't believe that people could stay out on strike for that long. They came, the miners from South Africa. I said to some of the miners who came over from South Africa, they came to Caerphilly with a pile of, and they were black South Africans. I thought, good gracious me, you know, you've got your own problems over there with apartheid. No, Ray said, we come over here, he says, to marvel at the fact that you you people are doing what you are doing. And he said, from you, he said, we'll take our inspiration back, he said, and it helps us to fight our battles, he said, and we've got lots of battles to fight, he said. But he said, believe me, we've got a tale to tell when we get back to South Africa. And that was the same. There were people, there was miners from Chile there. There was miners from America. They came from all over the world. So where is the defeat when a group of miners from South Wales and from Britain can inspire the rest of the world and encourage them to go back from the coalfields and fight for their own strike? No defeat, but a betrayal. Yes, they were betrayed. Yeah, Kinnock became the leader of the Labour Party, but he never became Prime Minister. And Ron Davies did become a cabinet member, and Kim Owens did have a safe Labour seat. And it's unfortunate that they sometimes go on the telly these days, and you hear them talking, you think they were on the bloody man in the barricades. And I'm desperate to get Arthur Scargill to come down to Cardiff and speak in a massive meeting, because I want the true story to be told about that strike. The real true story about the heroism, about the courage, not only of the miners, but the women, but everybody that all stood together. And I want Arthur to come down and give that story. But I think he feels angry about some of the Welsh MPs, the Labour MPs, such as Kinnock and such of others, this, that and the other. But I wrote him a very, very long letter telling him that he owes it to himself, he owes it to those miners who have stood by him all through in South Wales to come down and help them commemorate the strike as they knew it and as we knew it. So the books are here. My book, as I've already said, it talks about my life in the mining industry, about my early years and about the strike and things like that. And Debbie's has got contributions from miners all over the South Wales area. So thanks very much for listening. I'm hoping I can chat with some of you afterwards. The proceeds of my book obviously is going to go to